How does a campus map side hustle turn into one of the biggest job boards in the world? Steven Rothberg, founder of collegerecruiter.com, didn't set out to disrupt hiring. He just wanted to solve a problem. But along the way, he built a platform that now serves over 12 million early career job seekers a year. In this episode, we break down how he scaled a business without VC funding, the hiring mistakes companies keep making, and why AI is quietly reshaping recruitment in ways most people don't realize. If you're an entrepreneur, hiring manager, or just someone fascinated by the shifting world of careers, you won't want to miss this one.
So the very earliest origins of the company date back to when I was in my fourth year of undergraduate university. I grew up in Winnipeg, went to the University of Manitoba. I was in a small business marketing class, and one of my best friends had a little micro business that he was publishing calendars, coupon books, stuff like that. Local merchants, restaurants, retailers, apartment companies, etc., would advertise with him, and he would give the publications, the calendars, coupon books, etc., away for free to the students. I went on vacation to Phoenix, and in suburban Phoenix, there's a really big university, Arizona State University. And I went to the campus because at the time I was planning on going to law school after graduating from undergrad. And that was one of the law schools I was thinking about attending. So I went to the campus. They gave me a campus map. Around the borders, there were ads. And I took that map back to my friend, and it's like, hey, Rob, you should do this. You've got these calendars, you've got these coupon books. You should also do this campus map. It's a great way of hitting incoming students, new faculty, staff, etc. He thought it was the stupidest idea in the world. And so I said, hey, I'm looking for something to do in the summertime in between undergrad and moving to Minneapolis to go to law school. By that time, I was sort of flash forward a little bit. Would you mind if I did it? And he's like, knock yourself out, because he thought it was going to be a complete failure. I worked about half as many hours that summer as most of my friends did, made about twice as much money, and probably enjoyed my life 10 times as much as any of them did. So I really had that entrepreneurial bug. Went to law school, basically handed over the business to a couple of friends of mine, sold it for a pittance. One of them actually continues to run it to this day. It's greatly evolved after 35, 36 years or whatever it is. And then after I graduated, I was working as a lawyer during my first year. That friend called me and said, hey, running this business in Winnipeg that, you started 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I'm thinking about expanding to Minneapolis. It's the next biggest city to Winnipeg. And would you be interested in being my partner? And then you can do Minneapolis, I can do Winnipeg. We tried to work it out financially, and it just couldn't. The numbers just didn't work. So then his interest in coming to Minneapolis and expanding to Minneapolis vanished. And so again, it was kind of like, well, would you mind if I did it? And he's like, knock yourself out. In this case, he actually believed it would work, unlike the previous time. So I started the business part-time while I was working as a lawyer full-time, got some contracts, got it up and running. And the first things that it did, it was just a micro business. It was me and a contractor or two. The first thing were campus maps, one for the University of Minnesota and others for some other schools, sold the advertising around the borders, gave them away free to students. So same business model, basically the same product. After a couple of years, I started to think, it would be really good to diversify the business so it wasn't so reliant, and it was incredibly seasonal. I would work like crazy for like 10 weeks, and then the rest of the year, hardly at all. I was making all my money and all my profits in about 2.5 months. So it's like, what do I fill the rest of the year with? And I realized that the campus maps did a really good job of hitting people who were new to campus, staff, faculty, incoming students. As in the US, we would call them freshmen. But I could add a product that did not cannibalize sales if I figured out what would graduating students need, seniors, as they're called in the US. Well, the thing that seniors need more than anything else is a job. So I created a magazine called College Recruiter. After a couple of issues, a couple of quarters, there were 4 different regionalized versions in the US. Distributed by about 200 to 250 schools. And then this thing called the internet came along. So in 1996, we created the very first version of what's now collegerecruiter.com. At the time, Yahoo had just launched. Google was still 2 years away from existing and another few years away from having any kind of revenue. So it was very early, very Wild West. Everybody was just trying to figure out, is this a fad? Where is this going? There was all this controversy at the time, even just about the internet shouldn't be commercialized. There should be no advertising on it. There weren't shopping carts. There wasn't like an Amazon that you could go and easily like buy 12 different things, put them into your cart, check out, pay, and have it on your doorstep the next day. None of that stuff existed. The very first version of our website allowed you to search the jobs that were advertised either by occupational field, like say engineering, or by location, say Minnesota, but not both. So if you clicked on engineering, you saw all the engineering jobs. Now, there were only a few dozen, so it wasn't that big of a deal. And then about 2 weeks after we launched, guy calls up. He worked for a financial services company in Texas. And he's like, okay, just went to Yahoo. I'm looking to hire a bunch of students to come and work for me as interns in financial services internships. How do I advertise those jobs on your website? I'm like, I don't know. Because what we had been doing is just taking the ads from the magazines and putting them on the website. We hadn't thought about the fact that somebody might actually want to run an ad just on the website. So I explained to him about the magazine and the prices and stuff. And the cheapest price to run an ad in the magazine was $485 for 3 months. So he's like, well, how about if I pay you $485 and you run our ad on your website for 3 months? And I was like, okay, that seems fair. Sure. And he's like, do you take credit cards? So the guy paid and a business was born. You know, one of the things that a lot of entrepreneurs need to learn, and we all kind of need to, almost all of us need to, is that when you've got a customer who's trying to give you their money, you need to find a way of making that happen.
Yeah.
And so just because you have a product that you think is going to be of really good use for one kind of organization, if you've got a different kind of organization that wants that product, then maybe it's probably a good thing. It's not necessarily like, you know, if you're selling knives and a serial killer wants to buy them, you probably don't want to go down that path. But, you know, if you were thinking that you were going to sell your knives door to door and like some massive retailer calls you up and says, hey, we want to buy 50,000 of these knives, you probably want to figure out a way of saying yes.
Of course. Yeah, 100%. And what does your role look like today in the business?
Yeah.
I mean, it's evolved a lot.
Yeah. So we manage, well, my job title is founder, which makes sense. I think everybody listening will understand that. And then the other part of it, probably most people are going to be like, okay, that's really weird. And that's chief visionary officer. Okay. So where chief visionary officer comes from is that we run our business using a framework called EOS, Entrepreneur's Operating System. Anybody that wants to learn more about it, there's a great book put up by the person who created it. Gino Wickman is the guy, and the book is called Traction, Get a Grip on Your Business. I don't get a commission. Anybody that wants to send me a check, I'll cash it, but that's not, but it's a really good book for small businesses. If you've got, say, 10 to maybe 100 employees, it's really fantastic. It walks you through in a very detailed way how to run meetings, how to set goals, how to make people accountable. And accountability in EOS world is about expectations. It's about the carrot, not the stick. It's about Christina saying, hey, you know, Miss Employee, I asked you to do X this quarter and you did. And therefore we both know that you did a good job. That's how accountability is used in the EOS world. Well, in the EOS world, they have what's called an accountability chart. And it's kind of like an organizational chart. The person in the organization that's in charge of strategy, trying to figure out where that company needs to be 6 months from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now, is called the visionary. Usually the founder, not always. That's my role. So I need to have my head up, my eyes open, looking at trends in other industries, looking at trends in our industries, and trying to figure out where do we need to be 6, 12, 24 months from now. So one of the things about that visionary role is that, and this sounds kind of odd, but it works really well for me, I have no accountabilities. The visionary, by
Mm-hmm.
definition, isn't supposed to be focused on tasks like doing this today or this that week or whatever. I also have nobody reporting to me, which is really good because I hate managing people and I'm really bad at it. So for all of our employees, they're really thankful that that's not the case. So we have some really good managers in our small business, and let them do what they're good at, and let me do what I'm good at.
Mm-hmm. It seems like you're really good at building a team around you that really gets everything going and allows you to focus on the actual deep work for pushing the company forward. That's really interesting.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely a piece of that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like we just hired a guy who's led partnerships for some of the world's biggest job boards and related organizations. When that role opened up at College Recruiter, then I suggested to the hiring manager, our company president, here are a few people that I think would be a really good fit. And two of those people ended up being finalists. And one of the people that I recommended was this person that I hired. That's about as far as I could claim to be a responsible, if you will. So again, I had my head up, eyes open. I knew this guy for years. I'd worked with him in different companies, and I always kind of had in the back of my mind, this is a real star in our industry. And if we ever have the opportunity to work with him, either with him at another organization and we just partner with him, or maybe him working for our organization, then that would be great. But the heavy lifting, the trying to figure out an employment package that worked for us and worked for him, and the start
Yeah.
date, his responsibilities, who he's going to be contacting, what he says, all of that is handled by people much better capable at that than I am.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like your role itself allows you to keep your head up and looking for these types of people. If you were bogged down in all the
Mm-hmm.
details, I'm sure it would be a lot harder to actually get the right people on board and get a sense of what's out there because your focus is too fragmented.
Yeah. And very early on, the first few years in the business, I never had this, but I probably should have. My business card could have had a job title of like chef, cook, and bottle washer. Like, when you start your own business, whether it's literally just you or whether it's
Mm-hmm.
you and maybe a few other people, you do everything.
Yeah,
You
you're
need
wearing all
to.
the hats.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you're emptying the trash, you're cleaning the toilets, you're calling customers, you're doing collections, you're sending out bills, you're dealing with the bank. You need to do everything. And I think that's an area that a lot of people fail at. That a lot of people come in and start their own company because they're really good at building tech or really good at
Mm-hmm.
sales. And they don't realize that to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to be like competent at almost everything. You don't
Yeah.
have to be a master at anything.
You have to
Um,
know what good looks like so that you know who to
yeah,
hire.
yes, right, absolutely. Yeah, it's if you definitely the key factor in the success of any business is hiring really good people. Like,
Mm-hmm.
people that you hire, Christina, I'm sure one of the reasons you hire them is because they're better at what they do than you are. Where I
Yeah,
see a lot of
exactly.
entrepreneurs failing is like an insecurity issue. Oh, if we hire Cindy, Cindy's going to be better at sales than I am. Therefore, somehow that makes me a bad person. It's like, no, quite the opposite. It's
Yeah.
recognizing that Cindy's better than you and giving her that opportunity, and therefore she wins and you win and the customer wins. It's like, when you've got
Yeah.
an opportunity to bring on really good people, you bring them on.
Yeah. I think it's key to get out of the technician role and really allow other people to I think one thing I struggled with was letting go of control early
Mm,
on. Like you know what you want it to look like, you know what you want to do, and then it's really difficult when someone else does something slightly differently, and then you start thinking, no, 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 this is the way I think it should be, and then letting go of the I think control and helping people to grow in the direction that's even further than your own, I think is like the most valuable thing.
yeah, and
Um,
I'm a lot better at that than I used to be, but I wouldn't say that I'm good. So like I'm definitely not a control freak, but exactly as you were just describing it, it's like somebody doing it in a different way. Like we use Salesforce for our CRM.
Mm-hmm.
And for years and years and years, I've used Salesforce to remind myself that when I need to do something, like they call it a task or a to-do.
Yeah.
And I have a very specific way of kind of writing that subject line. And I
Mm-hmm.
initially tried to have everybody in our company do the same thing. It worked for
Mm-hmm.
me, therefore it would work for them. And I had to learn, no, that I might actually be making it harder for them to get their work done.
Right.
So definitely I've learned to let go of most things and continue to remind myself at times,
Yeah.
this is not where I need to be involved. I need to be looking at bigger picture, longer term, more strategic. And
Mm-hmm.
if somebody doesn't use a task in Salesforce the way I do, that's on me. If I start to get it, if I start to get into the weeds like that, that's my bad, not
Yeah.
theirs.
100%. So, as Chief Visionary Officer, what excites you the most about future entry-level recruitment, and how does that vision kind of shape your future strategy now that you're developed so far along?
Yeah. So the path into the niche that we chose for the job search site, for those who don't know College Recruiter, we're kind of like, say, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn. We're a job board. Employers pay to advertise their jobs with us. Our niche are candidates who are early in their careers, 0 to 5 years. So part-time job, seasonal, internship, apprenticeship, maybe the first, second job after school. That kind of came about because the business grew out of this campus map business. So we were always
Mm-hmm.
kind of focused on that student, recent grad audience. What excites me about this business is that the job board business, a friend of mine, Jeff Dickey Chazins, said months ago, maybe it was a year ago, he said something to the effect of that job boards are like amoebas, that
Mm.
amoebas are really good at absorbing things that are around them and making that part of themselves. So detractors of job boards would say job boards haven't changed. They haven't evolved since they kind
Mm.
of came into the being in the early to mid 90s. And nothing can be further from the truth. The
Mm-hmm.
technology, the business model, how we measure our success, how we communicate that, how we find candidates, engage with candidates, deliver them to the employers that are using our sites, all of that has massively changed. And the reason that it's massively changed is that the job board industry was born out of the stagnation of the newspaper industry.
Mm-hmm.
Newspapers didn't want to evolve. And that gave an opening to our industry to be born. Newspapers were making most of their money from help wanted classified ads. Job
Mm-hmm.
boards stepped in, and that money largely went to job boards. So kind of right from our being, it became part of our DNA to
Mm.
like not repeat the mistake of the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
So when you and I were talking earlier about AI,
Yeah.
so some of the biggest, earliest adopters of AI in the recruitment world are job boards.
Mm-hmm.
Job boards like College Recruiter use AI to sort of better identify employers or job posting ads that need
Mm-hmm.
more candidates going to them. If you advertise a job with us and you need, say, 20 people to apply in order to feel confident that you're going to hire the person you need, if we've delivered 50 people to you, you don't want us to deliver more.
Yeah.
It's hurting you at that
Yeah.
point. It's too much. It's too much quantity. On
Mm-hmm.
the other hand, if we've delivered 3 people to you, you need more. Maybe one of those 3 people is actually the right candidate, but just if you're playing a numbers game, it's like, no, I want 20. So job boards use AI for things like that. If
Mm-hmm.
Christina posts one job with us and we're looking at that one job manually, it's pretty easy to see how that job is performing. But at
Yeah.
any given time, we have about 3 million jobs on our site, and about
Mm-hmm.
1 million of them are new each day.
Wow. Okay.
So it's not feasible for
Yeah.
anybody to be looking at all those postings and trying to see which ones need more response, which ones need fewer. So that's one way that a lot of job boards are using AI. Some job boards have embraced AI in the sense of like making tools available to candidates. We're going to assist you in writing your resume or CV. We're going to make it easier to apply to jobs. I think that's a really good thing. A real
Mm-hmm.
candidate who kind of has like almost like an older sister or a mom or somebody kind of like helping you
Mm,
out. Hey, Christina, your cover letter is awesome, but you missed a word. Like there's a
mm-hmm.
typo, right? Some employers stupidly would say, I'm not going to hire you because you missed putting the word the
Yeah.
into your cover letter. And by the way, you're applying to be a mechanical engineer, not a journalist. AI can help with that.
Sure.
Like just like Grammarly, spell check have helped all of us for years with writing emails. A lot of the AI products that assist candidates in applying are like that. Where I'm worried about AI, and maybe I'm getting beyond the scope of your question, where I'm worried about AI is that there are some, I consider them to be bad actors. Some of them are countries like North Korea. Some
Right.
of them are international organized crime syndicates. Some of them, it's like a guy in his garage in Des Moines, Iowa, but they're using AI to pretend that they're one thing and they're actually another. So they might pretend that they're like this fantastic JavaScript
Mm,
developer and they've got all this experience from all these fantastic companies. Christina, you should now hire me for this remote opportunity. You hire them, everything seems fine. They get access to your systems, and before you know it, you're locked
mm,
out of your systems and you now have to pay them a ransom.
right.
And this happened to us about a year ago. We were looking to hire a bookkeeper,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody applied to the job who was fantastic. She interviewed really well. We interviewed with her on Zoom. Everything was great. There were just some like really weird flags, red flags.
Mm,
We ended up declining to hire her and hired someone else. I still look back and I think that that person that we were interviewing wasn't actually a person. I think
oh.
it was an AI basically bot or person using AI to create a false identity. And what she was looking to do probably was to get access
Mm,
to our accounting systems, which would then make it easier for her to embezzle money.
wow.
So we all as employers need to be careful about
Mm-hmm.
that. And there aren't any simple answers. So if like somebody's listening right now, it's like, oh, well, yeah, what's the solution? It's like, I wish I knew.
Yeah. Is that a problem with getting students on your job board? Are you guys screening for this kind of stuff? Because I've seen a lot of pretty crazy posts, even on LinkedIn, with
Yeah.
someone was interviewing someone and they had literally changed their face using AI in the interview. So the
Wow.
interviewer was like, "Can you put your hand in front of your face?" And
Oh,
he was like, "No." Like he kept avoiding the question and refusing. And the interviewer said, "No, there's something. Can you, if you don't put your hand in front of your face, we're ending the interview." So he wouldn't do it, and he completely like closed the like said goodbye, whatever. But it was crazy. You could see his face was literally completely altered. So I have no idea
wow.
what the point of that even would be, but it's really crazy where things are going.
Yeah. And I think the point of that probably is for these bad actors to infiltrate your company, embezzle money, lock you out of your systems, something along steal trade secrets,
Mm-hmm.
um, all of that. It's kind of a corporate espionage thing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we all need to be more and more careful. It's harder and harder to detect it. So to answer your question, though, I don't think it's had any negative impact on enabling us or making it more difficult for us to get candidates to come to our site, search for
Mm-hmm.
jobs, apply to those. The problem is more on the employer side.
Right.
The candidates that apply to the jobs, whether they find that from through Google, LinkedIn, Indeed, College Recruiter, whatever, which of these candidates are actually real?
Exactly. Yeah.
Some I saw, and I think it was also on LinkedIn, I saw an employer share a screenshot from their ATS and it showed,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, 20 applications. And I think 19 of them, the names looked real. Cindy Smiths.
Okay.
The resumes all started off with exactly the same formatting and pretty much the identical words. So it's like, that's unusual. But if
Yeah.
anybody's ever used like a template to write a resume, in Canvas or something like that, it's, it's like, okay, if a whole bunch of people are using the same tool, of course our resumes are all going to look pretty much the same. But what was really suspicious is that their email addresses were all basically like gibberish. XR4TI, QR349 at gmail.com. They were all emails like that.
Wow.
So that's an example of whoever built that system didn't solve that last mile problem. They should have created Gmail addresses that were similar to the name. For me, like Steven.Rothberg at gmail.com, not XR4TI48394 at gmail.com. And if it had been 1 out of 20 candidates that had an email address like that, then it's like, well, okay, maybe that's just that person picked a weird email address, or maybe it's just one bot. But it was like 19 out of 20.
Wow.
Where I think we're going with this is there are a whole bunch of tools that have just come onto the market, and I know of a number of others that quite frankly, Christina, remind when you said like put the hand over the face, they're testing for things that AI, at least today, can't handle.
I see. Okay.
And so the hand over the face, I hadn't heard that one. That's fascinating to me, but I could totally see that being the case. Some of them, I just saw one a couple of days ago where, the CAPTCHA forms where you have to check the box. And other ones, it's like got the kind of scribbly letters and you have to type those in. So picture that, but it revolves around your screen in kind of a circle. And so you have to take your mouse and follow it and click on it wherever it is on your screen. So right now, AI is bad at that because AI takes a screenshot of essentially the browser to then interpret what it thinks that is showing. And when things are moving, it can't keep up. Today,
I see.
A year from now, I bet you it will.
Who knows?
It's a cat. It's a cat and mouse game. But one of the reasons I think that these tools are going to be used by employers more than the sourcing partners, more than like a staffing agency or a job board, is that the bottom of the hiring funnel is with the employer. You want to validate the authenticity of all of your candidates, not just candidates that come from LinkedIn or College Recruiter or a staffing agency. And you want to put all your candidates through the same test, the same process that you found to work, not just some. So the higher in the funnel that the validation occurs, the less value I think it delivers. So I get calls multiple times a week from some of these vendors saying College Recruiters should be adding this validation tool to screen out AI. And we do have some of that because we don't want to deliver AI to our candidates, AI bots to our candidates. But at the end of the day, I really think that the employers, their applicant tracking systems, that's a more effective place for it because it then gets all of the candidates, not just some.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are you guys working on any, I guess, educational material to help out your maybe employers that are on your platform who aren't aware of this stuff? If you can't help them out with everyone, I think that could be some valuable information.
Yeah, we publish an average of a blog article a day about a variety of topics, and some of it is exactly what you're saying. So we definitely, one of our core values, again, this is an EOS thing, and one of our core values is thought leadership. And so we invest time and money into sharing thoughts, guidance, you could call it maybe wisdom, things that we've learned the hard way sometimes. And hopefully that helps. We also, I'm the co-host of a couple of other podcasts. One is called the High Volume Hiring Podcast. We talk about this stuff all the time. In fact, the episode that comes out towards the end of February, and we're recording earlier, but this episode will probably come out around the time that one does. That one is going to be on exactly this issue. It's like how do you identify these AI generated applications, like from not real people? And what do you do about them? I'm also the co-host of a podcast called the Inside Job Boards and Recruitment Marketplaces podcast, and that's targeted at job board leaders. How do we as an industry get better at this? And it's a topic that we've discussed a number of times. I'm a big believer in the rising tide lifts all ships. If we at College Recruiter have figured out a way of really minimizing the negative impact of AI, whether it's on the candidates or on the employers, we want to share that. It would be selfish and maybe in the short term good for our business if we didn't. But to the extent that the job board industry thrives, we thrive too.
Of course.
And so we look for win-wins.
That's awesome. I was actually curious, given that Gen Z now is getting into the job market a lot more, are there any significant improvements or changes you've had to make to sort of keep pace with how Gen Z approaches career searches? Or is there any differences you've noticed, but like how things have changed?
Yeah, I find generational differences to be fascinating. But one thing I've learned over the years is that there are far more similarities than there are differences. So one of the things that is very different for Gen Z than for my generation, I'm a Gen Xer, is that when I went to school, not a single one of my friends had to be concerned about how much they were going to get paid in their first job in order to be able to live, in order to be able to afford food, rent, paying their student loans. None of us. None of us could afford to live really well, but we all knew that whatever job we took, we would be able to make enough money to pay those basic living expenses. Gen Z is the opposite, especially in the U.S. and where student loans can be massive. It's not unusual for a student to have $80,000 in student loans. Some of them, especially the ones that go to grad school, easily into the hundreds of thousands. That means that you've got a mortgage payment. It means that you're paying $2,000, $3,000 a month for your student loans. Call it $20,000, $30,000 a year after tax. So if it's $30,000 a year in the US, that means you probably have to make about $40,000, $45,000 a year just to pay your student loans. So if you're going to go and work in like social service and your starting salary is 33 grand and you've got $45,000 in gross wages that you need to make, how does that work? You've got to come from a wealthy family, right? And you can't not pay your student loans. That was a thing for a while with COVID, but not anymore. So money is critical, much more so than it was for my generation. It was important to Gen Xers, but it wasn't for survival. It was more kind of like, so we can go buy toys. So one of the things that we did at College Recruiter a couple years ago is that we started to really force the employers that were advertising their jobs with us to share salary information. And salary transparency is a really good thing. A lot of the employers went along, no problem, here you go, because there was definitely a trend towards being transparent with salary ranges. So we were able to get that data pretty easily from most of our customers, but not all. And so for the ones that wouldn't share it, or sometimes they couldn't, they just didn't have a good automated way of doing that, we would put estimated salary ranges onto the jobs. And that worked pretty well for most of the postings in the US and Canada. And it worked really badly for most of the postings everywhere else in the world. There's just not good salary data for countries like, say, Belgium. And we're global. And so we were kind of caught in this situation where we've got really good data for some candidates, some jobs, and really bad data for others. And so we pulled back a bit, and now we still work really hard to get that salary data when the employers can provide it, but we just didn't have faith that the estimates were accurate for most of the jobs on our site. So we felt like if the choice was to provide no data or inaccurate data, we were better off providing no data. But trust me, this is a hot button issue for me and for us. We as an industry, recruiting agencies, employers, job boards, everybody in this industry, needs to be transparent about salary.
Mm-hmm.
There's only good reason for employers not sharing their salary ranges is if they want to engage in wage theft. And I
Yeah.
know that that's going to really upset some of your listeners, and so be it. Reach out to me. We can have a good conversation. But what I mean by that is, if I want to hire you, Christina, for whatever role,
Yeah.
director of marketing, whatever it's going to
Sure.
be, and I don't tell you how much that job pays, the reason I'm not telling you is because I want to pay you as little as possible.
Of course.
And that's wage theft.
Yeah.
If you deserve 80 grand and I think I can get away with paying you 45, I just stole $35,000 from you.
100%.
And that's not okay.
Yeah, I know. It's so crazy to me. I mean, I see this all the time, even on LinkedIn. People are posting about frustrations with applications because they're misled by the actual
Yes.
information on salary, and then it feels like they're wasting their time when they go into it, and they're completely thrown off because their expectations are not at all met.
Right.
And it's just frustrating for everyone. I mean, even on the employer side, I'm assuming it's quite frustrating when everyone you get is not interested once they pass through all this interview process. So I think that's really great that you guys are enforcing this, because especially even for me, honestly, I didn't know College Recruiter existed when I was in school, but it would have been so great to have because initially I studied architecture in university, and at times, especially with COVID and everything, like if anything like that's going on, it's really difficult to find a job in that market, and having a platform that kind of consolidates everything, I think would have been so helpful. Which actually leads me to ask, so there's things like Indeed and even LinkedIn for finding jobs, and I've heard of Handshake now, but I didn't back in the day. And I was wondering, how do you attract entry-level talent like students and also employers? Because I honestly hadn't heard of you guys, but I'm assuming you guys have grown a lot. So how do you approach that?
Yeah. So over 12 million students, recent grads, others are early in their careers, use our site a year. And by use, we take a really, really conservative definition of that. What we mean there is that if we connect that job seeker with the employer, like we send that candidate, for example, to the employer site to apply, we count that. If you just come to our site and read a blog article, we don't count you into 12 million because we haven't actually connected you. So, so we're high traffic. We actually have more candidates that we connect with employers than Handshake does. Handshake has more people using their platform. We connect more with employers. You can debate. We can have a good debate which one's more important. I think you know which one I believe is. One of the things that a lot of people don't really grasp in the world of employment is that there is no single solution for almost anything you think of. So candidates will always use multiple job boards. Employers, almost all of them, will use multiple job boards to advertise their job. Even if they post the job to one, even if they only post it to ZipRecruiter or only post it to Indeed, trust me, those sites are then essentially reposting it. In the business, it's in our industry, it's called resyndication. So College Recruiter receives job postings from ZipRecruiter. We receive job postings from Indeed. We receive job postings from other job boards, and we send some of our postings to some of them. Recruiters, third-party recruiters, headhunters, they'll be familiar with that business model, and it's often called splits. One recruiter kind of has the candidate, the other recruiter kind of has the employer, and then they work together to bring those two together, and then they split or share the placement fee. Job boards have a similar kind of model. So for us, it's never about trying to be the job board, the only job board for our audience. We want to be an important part of that ecosystem. Another thing that we do that's really unusual is that, and again, we can debate whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, but we try to stay out of the way of the candidate and the employer as much as possible. Most job boards create like a speed bump, or some places call it speed humps. So they make it a little, there's like some bad friction there. You go to the job board, you run a search, you cannot apply until you register with the job board and hand over a whole bunch of your details. Okay. That creates an impediment because some job seekers, it's like, I don't want to give my data to this job board. I want to apply to this job. I want to work for that employer. My goal here isn't to register with XYZ job board. So we 3 years ago stopped accepting personally identifiable information on candidates. You cannot register with us. If you come and
Wow.
search for a job on our site and find it and click the apply button, we send you to the employer's application page, wherever they want you to apply. So that reduces our ability to then email you a week later and say, hey, Christina, we just found 12 new jobs for you. We can't do that because we don't know who you are. But on the other hand, we make it much easier for you to apply to that job. Therefore, you're more likely to apply. Therefore, you're more likely to get hired. We think that's a better model. And I think that as the world more or less progresses towards privacy being a bigger concern, I think that this model in the long term is a better one. Our industry, along with a lot of others, is like a vacuum cleaner in a bad way. We want to like suck up all of the data we can. And it's almost like that's the goal. And it shouldn't be. We need to keep in mind that our point of existing is to help people find new jobs. And if we do anything that we do that makes that harder is a bad thing.
That's really interesting. It almost reminds me of when you go into a store and you're maybe the only person in there and you feel the salesperson watching you, and then they start asking you, oh, can I help you? And you're just like, no, like, leave me alone. I want to look around myself. I want to have a look without feeling the pressure of, talking to them and buying something. So I think
So tell me that you're an introvert without telling me that you're an introvert. I share your pain, but that's a really great analogy. And whether you agree to it or not, I am going to reuse that in the future.
Feel free,
the salesperson absolutely is trying to help you find, a new jacket, camping equipment, hockey stick, whatever it is that you went into that store for. They're not trying to make it harder for you. They really do want to help you. And they want to do their job and they want to get paid their, $15 an hour, maybe get a sales commission on top of that. They're the job board.
Yeah.
Right. By registering with us, we're going to help you find a job. They sincerely believe that. And they're right about that for some of the candidates. Some of the candidates want that. But what if you don't? What if you just want to be left alone? It's like, I don't need your help. I know exactly what I'm looking for. If I need your help, I'll ask for it.
Exactly.
But please don't delay me. I'm walking towards the back of the store where the hockey sticks are. I know what I want. Get out of my way. The more that you and I talk, the slower it is for me to go and get done what I want to get done. I love that analogy, Christina.
Yeah. And so do you guys also have option for asking for help? Assuming maybe you don't know what you're looking for and you don't have that hockey stick in mind and you're not beelining straight for it. Yeah. Is there any support you mentioned getting help with, I think you said resumes or tips on getting hired. So do you guys have some sort of support for those candidates?
We sort of do. And I think this is actually an area that I'm glad you said this because I think it's something that we should probably look at more and doing a better job. So we have about 30,000 pages of blog articles, thousands of videos, etc. It's pretty much by definition self-service. If you're a candidate and you're looking for help on, I'm applying to jobs, no employer will hire me because I don't have experience. How do I get experience if no one will allow me to get that experience? Really, really common for candidates who are early in their careers. We have hundreds of articles that are on that topic alone. So that we do definitely provide good help there. We do not have like a career coaching, career counseling kind of service. One thing about candidates who are early in their careers is that they're loath to pay for help.
Yeah.
So then you do need to realistically provide that to them for free. But the technology has advanced so much in the last couple of years, it would be very feasible for us to add like a chatbot to our site that uses the content on our site to provide that advice. So you come
I
out
was
and it's,
just thinking that, as you
yeah,
mentioned, it would be a really good idea to just train a model on everything you have,
yeah,
all the information, and then anyone who visits can ask questions, and they're perfectly tailored to everything you. Because it's also difficult as a student. I'm sure you see all this content, and it's almost overwhelming to
yes.
go through all these articles, go through all these videos when you're studying and you're doing other stuff. The time to consume the content itself is also sort of friction. And I
Mhm.
think when you know what question you have, like I think that's almost like the difference between going on Google and doing just a Google search versus talking to ChatGPT about a
Bingo.
very specific thing.
Yep.
Because you now don't have to go through all these web pages, filter through all the noise to find the exact answer you're looking for. You're just asking, like, for the very first line of my resume, what's like the most important thing I should put in there? Or what are I don't know, like what are the most important things that employers are looking for in X industry? And you can get a more direct answer. And I'm sure people could look up these things on ChatGPT, but ChatGPT is more general. So I think if you
Mhm.
already have produced specialized content on that information, that would be very valuable for
Yeah.
potential
Yeah.
candidates. Yeah.
I love it. Definitely I'm going to add that like to our to-do list. The ChatGPT and some other tools like that are fantastic. Those large language models and being able to
Mm-hmm.
understand your question, even if you don't phrase it very well, even if you don't reuse the right keywords,
Yeah.
it's gonna really understand, especially for something like this. That's
Mm-hmm.
pretty common. There's a ton of great content out there. But one of the problems with those large language models is that you as a user don't have any control over where the information originally
Comes
existed.
from
Is it pulling
exactly.
it from Wikipedia? Is it pulling it from a white nationalist site? I mean, like, where's it coming from? And the
Yeah.
LLMs are getting better at weighing different sources, but they're not great at
Yeah.
that. If there are thousands of pages about how to find a job from really disreputable sites, the LLMs aren't able to properly weigh that.
Yep.
Um, we certainly believe we're biased, but we certainly believe that the advice that we have on our site is good. It's curated, it's vetted. If there's articles on our site that are out of date, well, I'm sure there are some, but they're few and far between. The vast majority of the content is this is what we believe in. And it wouldn't be hard to use, even an OpenAI product where it's limiting the training data to just the
Yeah.
30,000 articles,
Exactly.
videos, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
love it.
really not hard. Yeah.
Keyword searching had its day, and uh, that day, I think within a couple of years is going to be largely in our rearview mirrors. I
Yeah.
absolutely think that the future of search is plain language, spoken, typed, whatever, but we should be able to ask our devices to help us just as
Mm-hmm.
we ask each other.
Yeah. I think also that would be a really huge differentiating factor for College Recruiter, for example,
Mm-hmm.
because I haven't heard of, I mean, I've helped clients, for example, create chatbots for their companies that are very targeted to their information that their company has and helping their client like answer frequently asked questions, because that takes up a lot of time from support staff, and it can be really time consuming for people when they have more high leverage things to focus on. So training models is honestly, I think, really smart, and I haven't really heard of any job board websites or anything in that area that is really specific to that. So that, yeah, I think that would be a really great differentiate. And for marketing too, I think it would really attract a lot of potential
Mm-hmm.
students. So yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I was curious. So in your journey to bringing more employers onto the platform and also students, what's the biggest challenge? Like, is it awareness of the platform for
Mm.
students, attracting them, or is it for employers? Would it be like ROI on like them being on the platform, getting quality candidates? So I'm just curious, like, what challenges are you guys facing in
Yeah.
like catering to two audiences almost?
Yeah, no, it totally is. It's so job boards are in a double-sided marketplace. We basically have two different customer groups. We've got the candidates who tend not to pay anything by design, and they shouldn't. And you've also got the employers. Very few of them actually come to the site, but they're the ones that write the checks. And you have to balance those two interests. The biggest challenge that that College Recruiter has, and I think that this is shared by, it's just kind of an industry-wide issue, is in that balance, the primary way of measuring success is what percentage of the candidates that you put a job posting in front of apply to that job. If I put a job posting in front of you and you don't apply to that job, I didn't help you find a job.
Yeah.
Right? Same thing on the employer side. If I put a candidate in front of their job posting who doesn't apply, that's somebody that the employer cannot hire. Like Wayne Gretzky's dad. Well, a lot of people attribute it to Wayne Gretzky. It was actually Wayne Gretzky talking about Wayne Gretzky's dad. But Walter Gretzky, Wayne's dad, said to him when he was growing up, you miss 100% of the shots that you never take. And that's really true with job applications. If you don't apply to a job, you cannot be hired. So the primary metric of success in the job board world is what's called the effective cost per application. If an employer pays you $100 and 10 people apply, your effective cost per application is $10. So when an employer is saying, should we spend money with College Recruiter or Indeed, at the end of the day, they're usually looking at that ECPA, that effective cost per application. So we want that to be as low as possible. We want to have as many candidates apply to that job as possible to bring down that ECPA, but they have to be quality.
Yeah.
Because if going back to our conversation earlier about like 19 out of 20 being AI bots, well, those are applications technically. We don't charge for those, but those are technically applications, but it doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
So they have to be qualified candidates. And the way that employers are starting to think about quality is, if I apply to one of your job postings, you look at my application and you say, I want to do a phone interview with you. I want you to come in and meet with my team. But something moving me forward in the process in some way, that's an indicator that you've looked at my application and you say, he's good enough to spend a little bit more time on. I might not be good enough to hire. You don't know that yet. But that's a good objective measure of quality. If you just reject me out of hand and don't even talk to me, that's a good measure of quality too, bad quality. So the biggest struggle that job boards have is trying to get enough well-qualified candidates to apply to the jobs so that their ECPA is low. Like that's when, at the end of the day, it's like everything kind of revolves around that metric.
Right. So sort of like cost to acquire consumer in general business, like CAC, so keeping that low, but making the quality high, essentially.
And so there's definitely like tension between different interests there. You don't want to just maximize the number of applications because that leads you to just driving a bunch of crap.
Right.
On the other hand, you don't want to like go, I'm only going to send like the most highly qualified people, because then your quantity is going to be low. And the reality is a job board cannot know what a recruiter knows. Recruiters will look at an application and often be surprised. It's like, oh, wow, it didn't occur to me that when I'm hiring for this, architecture engineer or intern, I should say, that she might also speak a foreign language. And that would be really helpful if she spoke Spanish or French or whatever. This person actually brings everything to the table that I thought I wanted and more. That job boards can't know that. We don't know that speaking French is something the recruiter would value. If it's not in the posting, we can't know it. So it's job boards aren't placement agencies. We're not staffing agencies. We're not paid per hire. We're basically, at the end of the day, it's a lead generation business. And no company wants to buy leads or generate leads that are really high quantity but really low quality, or really high quality but also really low quantity. You want both.
And then, okay, I understand how you attract students. It's pretty, I'm sure they come across you pretty easily. But
Google, other job boards, LinkedIn, YouTube videos, etc. Yeah.
And then for employers, do you guys reach out, or is it they just come to you? And
both.
Do you have to demonstrate sort of that exact metric of quality and quantity to them, or how do you market yourself to these employers?
Job boards like, say, ZipRecruiter or Indeed, that have a ton of SMBs, small and medium-sized businesses, they spend a lot more money on sales than we do per customer, per dollar in revenue, because you have to handhold a small employer a lot more. They tend to be less sophisticated. They don't really know what they want. Sometimes they don't even know what questions to ask. They also are the most likely to be Karens, to kind of complain about things when it's like, suck it up, buttercup. And bigger employers are also coincidentally the biggest employers of students and recent grads. So most students and recent grads are hired by large organizations. Large organizations tend to be the ones that have the most sophisticated hiring practices. And that means that when we're working with them, they pretty much already know whether they want to work with us or not by the time we're even talking to them. So mostly when we bring on a new customer, I bet you 80% of them, they come to us, and they usually come to us through an intermediary. So a large organization, think Fortune 1000, think government agency. Most of them work with advertising agencies that advise them on where to run their ads, what the ads should say, how they should look, etc. I mean, you do a lot of marketing work. It's kind of like that, right? And if you help clients place their ads, then you know all about that conversation. You're trying to reach this audience. I looked at 20 different media sources. Here are the 3 that I think are going to be the best, ranked 1, 2, and 3. You've got enough budget for number 1 and number 2. You good with me going with those? That's the conversation that large employers have when they're deciding where to place their ads. And so we work a lot with the advertising agencies. The technology providers in our space are often called programmatic. It's like an automated way of posting job openings. And then there is no selling. It's just simply data driven. It's like, if we post this ad with you, what's the eCPA? And if you do well on that, then we'll post more with you. And if you don't do well on that, then you're not. It's very, very performance driven. It's not nearly as much of a beauty contest as it used to be. It's much more data driven.
Yeah, I guess the numbers don't lie. So there
yeah,
you
what's
go.
the expression, like numbers don't lie, but liars use numbers, or something like that?
Oh, I haven't heard that, but I feel like that would,
Yeah.
that
Well,
makes sense.
you gave me a good one with the store employee, and so I'm returning the favor.
Thank you. So for employers who are struggling to attract Gen Z talent, what's the best practices or quick wins that you would recommend?
Gen Z, by definition, they're younger adults. They're basically, I think the oldest one is now 26, maybe 27. So these are generally people who, well, by definition, they're early in their careers. It might not be their first job, might not be their second, but they're definitely early. And what that means is that they're tending to apply to jobs that are either literally entry level or close to it. Those jobs overwhelmingly have 3 factors that candidates care about when they're applying. Number 1, job title. Number 2, location. And number 3, compensation. If you don't communicate all 3 of those well right from the beginning, then the candidate will move on and they'll apply to a similar job with a similar employer, and you'll never know that they existed. So when you're advertising your job on your own site, on a job board, for the love of everything good and holy, do not use words like ninja, rock star, because nobody searches for a job that way. If you're hiring a salesperson, don't post a job with account title account executive, because salespeople, when they're searching for a sales position, they're going to put the word sales into their search. Account executive, the last time I looked, neither of those words are the same as sales. And so use the words that your candidates are going to use. In the body of your ad, you can always say, for this entry-level sales position, comma, which we call an account executive, comma, you will do blah, blah, blah. So you can put your quote-unquote real job title into the description if you want, if you feel that some insane lawyer out there might think that that's required, and no good lawyer would ever say that's required. Another story for another day. The location is really important, because if you've got an opportunity to work as, say, an architect 2 miles from your home versus 20 miles from your home, and the jobs are basically the same, Why would you drive 20 miles? You're going to favor that job that's close. And then the compensation, this is where most employers fall down. Only about half of jobs advertised online have compensation. Almost nobody takes a job for kicks and giggles. We need to pay for food. We need to pay for rent, mortgage, whatever, healthcare. Money is important. Employers hire you because you're going to help them generate more money or get their work done. They should be willing to pay you for that. They are willing to pay you for that, mostly. And so they should disclose that. Again, going back to the only good reason to not share that compensation is if you want to steal wages from your employees. So what happens with those early career Gen Z candidates is they tend to look at those three factors and then they apply to dozens of jobs.
Yep.
The reason they apply to dozens of jobs is because employers are going to look at dozens of candidates to hire the one person. So the candidates understand the ratios just as much as the employers do. Only about 4% of applicants are hired. Only about 4% of candidates who go to an employer's website are hired. So if you're a candidate, you need to be looking at hundreds, maybe thousands of jobs in order to get hired, just like employers need to be looking at hundreds and getting their ad out in front of thousands of candidates. It's the same ratio. It's just the other side of the desk. So candidates apply to dozens of jobs and then wait for the employers to respond. When the employer responds and says, hey, Christina, we're interested in interviewing you, then you go to their career site. Who are they? What do they make? What's their mission? What's their culture? If diversity matters to you, does it matter to them? Things like that. Then the candidate's going to engage with you. So it's when Gen Z candidates are going to be different that way. If you're talking about somebody who has 10, 20 years of experience, then location matters less because they're probably going to get paid more. There are probably fewer of those roles out there. They're going to understand that if I want that job as sales engineer, I'm going to have to drive 20 miles, and I just accept that. They also are going to better understand the compensation. When you reach that level, your compensation tends to be more fair. Senior level positions tend to pay more fairly right from the beginning. When employers underpay, it tends to be the more entry level positions, paying somebody $12 an hour when they should get 18. But if you've got an executive that should be getting paid, say, 150, maybe you're going to say 130 to 170. And so that, the range is right. So yeah, I mean, if there's one takeaway from all that, sorry for dragging that on,
Not at
but
all.
if there's one takeaway from all of that, the easiest thing, the most impactful thing that employers can do, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you have a big company, to solve that lack of quality application is disclose your salary range.
There you go. For every employer out there, please disclose your salary. I know so many people that struggle with finding jobs or hiring, and it's a mess. So I think that's super important. And just before we close up, I was wondering, on your 2 decades, I think over 2 decades of having College Recruiter, what's one decision that you made maybe early on that had an outsized impact on your success today?
Okay, love the question. 10 years ago, 2014, so a little over 10 years ago, we kind of somewhat randomly, two of our largest customers, Uber and Aflac, called up. I was doing most of the sales at the time. And they called up and they both asked me basically the same question within a few days. And the question basically was, we're buying the largest job posting package that we can from College Recruiter. It's $12,500 a year. Post as many jobs as you want. It's what we called an all-you-can-eat. You might call it unlimited package. If we gave you 4 times as much money, could you deliver 4 times as many candidates to us? It was like, okay, again, when a customer wants to give you money, you want to find a way of saying yes. And so basically, we did not have a way of doing that, but I could absolutely see this is something that we needed to do. So my wife, who's our CEO, and I basically did like a little retreat. We live in Minneapolis. We drove the 2.5 hours to Duluth, which is right on the shore of Lake Superior. Beautiful little city. And we spent a couple of days just mulling that over. How do we make that work? And I can still picture exactly where we were. We were walking like on this beach, right in the best part of Duluth. The Lake Superior is crashing on the shore, like right beside us. And a light bulb went on. You might call it an epiphany. And it dawned on me that the way that we were selling to employers and almost every other job board is that we were selling per posting.
Mm-hmm.
You spend X dollars, we give you Y postings. Whether those postings worked or not, whether we delivered a high quantity or low quantity. What if we instead charged by the candidate? Instead of charging by the posting, we charge by the candidate. How do you charge by the candidate? Well, Google and some other sites were doing really well charging per click. So could we do a pay per click in the job posting world? Instead of sending a buyer to a shopping site, we're sending a job seeker to an employer site. So
Wow.
went back to
Okay.
Uber, went back to Aflac, and said, we can either charge you per click, every candidate that we send to your job application, you're going to pay us, I think it was 50 cents,
Mm-hmm.
or every candidate that applies, we're going to charge you, and I think it was $20, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was nice. One went with a pay-per-click. The other one went with the paper application, which also gave us like a nice little A/B kind of a test.
Yeah.
And that week created the version of the business that we have now. We are
Wow.
100% performance-based. Every
That's
employer,
incredible.
every job posting on our site is either pay-per-click or paper application.
That's incredible. Yeah, tying everything to the value in that way is so smart, because that's exactly what ads do, right? And I think the fact that, yeah, I guess you guys started this whole system. I assume it had. Do
But
you
yeah,
know
no,
if anyone?
we were not first.
No?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, there's a job board. They're officed in Florida called Top USA Jobs. They were the first pay-per-click job board.
Okay.
Indeed popularized it,
Mm.
but we started doing it right around the same time that Indeed did.
Okay.
But obviously, Indeed has been massively successful. They execute incredibly well. Love them,
Yeah.
hate them. You can't deny they're very
Gotta
good at what they.
respect it.
You got to
Yeah.
respect them. Pardon me, they're very good at what they do.
There you go. Yeah. And where can listeners connect with you or learn more about College Recruiter?
Yeah, sure. If you would just want to learn more about College Recruiter, www.collegerecruiter.com. If you want to reach out to me, feel free to shoot me an email, Steven, Steven, at collegerecruiter.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steven. It's been a pleasure having you today. I had a lot of fun. And that's all for today's episode.
Cheers.